Welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to be continuing on the concept of constructors and methods, which was what I covered in my previous lecture, but we're going to kind of add some touches here. So we're going to work with the substring method as well as some compound operators to kind of make things a little bit more fancier and to just kind of cover a little bit more concepts on certain methods. So let's just dive deep into this code here and let's just code this all out. I will of course go through everything step by step, and you can see here that I have comments. So you guys, of course, I want you guys to read them first, and then of course I will then code the actual comments out. But just to let you guys get an idea, these comments are here for you guys to read. But of course, the first thing we need to do in the first comment I have is to declare our instance variables. So the way we declare our instance variables is through an access specifier known as private. So let me show you guys how that would work. So private is our access specifier. You can see that public is the class here. But keep in mind that with instance variables, we have to say that they are private. So private, and then what we do next is the declaration of the type. So for example, it could be an integer, so we say private int, then the name of the variable, we can do that whatever we want, name it whatever we want, James. And that's it, that's one instance variable there. So private int James. Private is our access specifier, int is our type, James is the variable name. Now let's just do private double jack, just to have some variety, and then we can do a string because I'm going to be using the substring method. So we do private string Jimmy, let's say. Cool, so we have our instance variables in place. The next thing we want to have is our default constructor, and we won't pass in anything here. So how this would look like is public, and then in constructor essentially is the same name as the class. So if you see here method call, my constructor will just be exactly method call. And we don't pass in anything there. And that's it. I just want that. And the reason why I don't pass in anything not only inside the constructor as parameters is because I'm going to be using the set methods. So if I were to actually write instance variables here inside the actual parentheses, then I would have to create an object with certain values inside. But I'm going to be using the set method. So the set method is essentially going to allow me to declare any value I want after I declare that object. I'll show you guys how that will look like, but just keep in mind that for now, the constructor has nothing inside because we will use the set method here. Awesome. So we have our constructor in place, so we can get rid of this. The next thing is to create our set and get methods. So that's the bulk of the pieces of code that we will be creating here. So one example of a set method would be public void set James. And then I'm going to be using int of James. And then braces. And then what I want to do, since I set the exact same instance variable name, essentially it was the same parameter. The parameter here, James, is the same as the instance variable, correct? It's the exact same. So since I'm using the instance variable as a parameter inside set James, I will be using it as an implicit parameter. So if I'm using an implicit parameter, I will have to use this dot. So it would be this dot James equals James. So keep in mind that if you use the instance variable inside one of the methods, it's going to be implicit, and as a result, we have to use this dot. The name of the instance variable equals the name of the instance variable. Kind of weird, but that's a kind of a rule and a way to actually emphasize that if you want to use the instance variable, use this dot. Then we have to do public void. So I'm going to be using set methods for each instance variable. So public void set jack, and then of course it's double jack, braces, then I use this dot jack because it's an implicit parameter. There we go. Do the same thing for that string, public void set Jimmy, string Jimmy, braces, this dot Jimmy equals Jimmy. Perfect. Now we're ready to actually then create our get methods, and then within these get methods, that is where I apply these compound operators and the substring method. So let me show you guys an example of this. So public And then with the get method, you need to specify the type actually. So we don't put void. And void, just in case you guys are not familiar, void just means you don't want to return anything, right? Set Jimmy, I'm just setting a value, so we're not going to return that. Instead, we're going to return it through the get method. So public, and we had int, right? So public int of get James, and we don't pass in anything because we already declared the type, braces. And then what we can do is return, we can say return James, really, and that's okay. Public int get James, and then public double get Jack, and this is where I'll use the compound operator. So public double get Jack, and then how we would write this with the compound operator is we can say return Jack plus equals 1. There we go. So that's an example of a compound operator. So this kind of looks weird at first because you're seeing that I just have a plus symbol and equal symbol right next to each other. So what does that mean? So another way you could write this out, this code is just the same as writing Jack is equal to Jack plus 1. So Jack plus equals 1 is a compound operator of Jack equals Jack plus 1. So in other words, you're just adding 1 to Jack and then just setting Jack equal to that. So for example, if I had Jack was equal to 16 plus equals 1, it just will set Jack to 17, basically. So keep that in mind. The compound operator will just add whatever value you want in addition to the previous value that you set for the variable name. So that is the compound operator. The next thing we want to do, next thing I will actually show you guys, is the substring method. So public string, which is our type, correct? Get, and our string name, variable name was Jimmy. So get Jimmy, braces, and then we can actually do return. And then the substring method, how we would write this out is since Jimmy was our instance variable name, so Jimmy dot substring, and then within the substring method, it actually acts as, or with the substring method, you can apply what is known as indexing. So I will show you guys an example of this. If we have a word Jackman, for example, let's say, and you want to do, for example, let's say from index 0 to 3. How would that work? So Jackman, each letter is of course an index value, but at index 0, you would have J. So J would be at index 0, A would be at index 1, C would be at 2, K would be 3, and then so on. So if I pass this in, pass in 0, 3 inside the substring method, you would actually get the result of 0, 1, 2. So it would be Jack, would be your output essentially. If we were to pass this in and Jackman was our word or was our string value. So 0, of course, that makes sense. So we're going from 0. So J is at 0, 1, 2, 3. But you're probably wondering why was K not returned? The way this works with the substring method is that it results in all of the values, all the characters of the string, but except from the last one, for the last one, I should say. So we have everything, we get everything back except for the last index value. So 3 actually is not passed out, and even though we actually said we wanted from 0 to 3 as a span of characters from the string. So keep that in mind, the last value is never returned. The index will never be returned. So keep that in mind. And then just for another kind of twist here, we can say Jimmy.substring, and then we can pass in from index 4 and so on. And then the reason why, or the reason, I should say, the way this would work, if I just included one index value. So let's look at Jackman again. Index 4 for Jackman would be at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it would start at letter M, and then it would go on. So let me reemphasize that. At index 4, we have K. Index 4, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 would be M. So at index 4, we have the letter M, and then it would take everything from M to the right. So our output would be with this, MAN. So we take, again, everything from that index value that we put, the starting index value, which was at 4, and then it would take everything from there to the right. So that's how just putting one index value or putting one number inside the substring method would result in an output of everything from that index value to the right, and so on. So that is the substring method. The last thing before we declare our main method and write everything out and create our object is to create our toString method. So the toString method is essentially public is string, to is string. It's essentially a way for us to kind of organize our code in a certain way. So toString method will organize our output. We can say return, let's say for fun, a bracket plus Jack plus Jimmy plus James. And then I actually want to put spaces here because I don't want everything compacted together. So I can say that Jack, and then one more space there, plus James, and a bracket there. And I forgot a plus symbol there. Make sure everything is correct. There we go. Awesome. So the toString method just essentially allows us to kind of, again, as I mentioned, organize our code, pass in the variables that we have in terms of values, and then we can add, for example, I guess brackets. You can literally add anything, even a string. You could even add this is cool, and it would pass in this string in addition to the values we would apply to Jack, Jimmy, and James. And that is our toString method. All right, awesome. So we did all of this. We did the toString method just now. And the last thing, really, all we need is to create our main method. And that is where we actually create our object and return our method values. So let's do that. Public is static void main string args braces. Okay. The first thing we need to do is create our object. The way we do that is we take the name of the class, method call. So method call. And then we create a name for that. So we can say JSON. So method call JSON equals to new method call. And again, see, I did not pass in anything inside because in the constructor, default constructor, I didn't have anything. I didn't have any parameters. So in my object, I don't have to worry about passing anything inside as parameters or any actually values here. So that is okay. The next thing, since we have our set get methods, all we need to do now is to call them. So JSON.set and set James, start with that, 50, JSON.set Jack, which was a double value, so we put 80.0. Keep that in mind, double just adds a decimal point there. And then JSON.set Jimmy was our string, and we can say cool man. All right, awesome. The last thing after this is to actually just do system.out.println, and this is where we print out our get methods. So system.out.println of JSON.get James, system.out.println of JSON.get Jack, and we do that for all of them. System.out.println of JSON.get Jimmy, and parentheses there because it's a method, and voila, there we go. Awesome. And of course, since we had the toString method, then I can do also system.out.println of JSON.toIsString. Okay, so now we're ready to actually see the output. We have everything in place. Before I actually run everything here, I wanted to do a quick review of what we did. So you saw here that I did my instance variables here. The first thing I did was my instance variables. Then I did my default constructor without putting anything in there, because then I would have the set James methods, set Jack method, set Jimmy to set all of our values. And then keep in mind that I put them as implicit parameters. Then I put the get methods for each instance variable. Then I put the toString method to organize all of our output. With that in mind, considering this, we then made our main method, and then within our main method, I just created our object, in addition to kind of setting the values there for our set methods, and then printing out the gets methods, and as well as our toString method. So all of that will now result in this output. All right, so the first thing we have to do, of course, with IntelliJ IDEA using this software is to hit this hammer button. So we do that just to kind of build everything that we wrote out here in terms of code. There we go, awesome. So now we can actually hit that, run method call main. There we go, awesome. So here's the code. Here is, or I should say, here is the output. You can see here that the first thing we had was get James, so our get James was 50, and I set that as 50, right? So that is perfect. We got that exactly as we wanted, as we expected. Then we got 81.0. I set it as 80.0, right? But if we go back to the set, or I should say the get James, right? Get Jack, sorry. So with the get Jack, you saw here that I made it a compound operator. I just added 1 to it, and that worked. Jack was equivalent to 80.0 plus 1, which resulted in 81. So that worked as expected, so that's awesome. And you saw here, Coolman was now Coolman. And the reason for that was because if you remember in the get Jimmy, I used the substring method. So I passed in, like, of course, certain index values and modified it, kind of just altering the string in a way in terms of indexing. And we got something different, right? Instead of Coolman, I got Coolman. So that all worked as expected. And in the toString method, I printed this out, 81.0 Coolman 50. And I think I could have also added spaces here a little bit. There we go. I think now if we run this, this should actually be split up. So let's do that quickly. There we go. Awesome. So you see here now, I have spaces here. They're split up. All I need to do is just add a space between these quotes here. So that all worked as expected, guys. So you can see here that with all these set methods, the get methods, the whole idea here, the main idea of this lecture was that not only could we create constructors and methods, but we could also apply within those methods, or within those, like, for example, the get method and the set methods. Primarily with the get methods, I could apply certain operations. I could add substring method. I could add a compound operator. There are really more things you can do with these methods, not just declaring them, just saying return Jack. I could also have done more than that, which in this case I did Jack plus equals 1 as a compound operator. Or with the get Jimmy, I said Jimmy.substring. So the main idea here I wanted you guys to consider was that with these methods, I could also do more with them. I could apply certain methods like the substring method as well as compound operators. And this is what we got. It all worked out fine and as expected. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this lecture. Please, as always, I would appreciate it if you guys could subscribe, like my videos. I will be also making more videos in the future, as always. And with that being said, again, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in a future video.